Joe, a regular guy going about his morning routine, was taken aback when he discovered a strange, misshapen creature flopping next to his toilet. Convinced it was a bizarre fish that somehow ended up in his bathroom, he rushed it to the vet for examination. But when the vet heard his story and took a look at the creature, his eyes widened and he uttered the words, "This is impossible." Joe was surprised by the vet's reaction, but he had no idea that things were only going to get even worse. Before he knew it, the vet was on the phone with the police, urging the officer to come to his clinic as soon as possible. "Officer, you must see this! Hurry!" he said, without explaining even a word about what was going on to Joe. Minutes later, Joe found himself alone in the vet's examination room, where he had been told to wait until the police arrived. When he tried to open the door, he realized that it was locked. He started banging on the door, yelling for someone to open it for him, but the vet only replied, "No, I can't let you leave." Joe was stunned. He could hear the police sirens getting closer in the distance. All he could think about was getting out of this room, or else this could end very badly for him. But what was so special about that creature Joe had found? What was it? And why did the police need to get involved? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. It was a slow Saturday morning for Joe. He hadn't even set an alarm, and when he woke up, it was almost noon. He yawned as he stretched his arms in bed, and then he threw the blankets off of him, feeling energized and recharged from the long week of hard work. He opened the curtains and went straight to the kitchen to turn on the coffee machine. This was perfect. His coffee would be done and waiting for him by the time he was in the bathroom, and it would have cooled off just enough so that he could drink it straight away. He wasn't in a hurry, but his whole body just yearned for that first cup of coffee. Once all of that was set and ready to go, he went to the bathroom without any idea of what would happen there. Joe took the time to wash his face and brush his teeth. I should shave today, he thought as he pat his face dry with a towel, and then he turned around to use the toilet. He sat down, finished his business, and flushed it once he was done. However, while he was washing his hands, he heard a strange sound, like something wet had fallen onto the floor. He assumed that it was just a noise that his toilet randomly made. It was quite old, and it had been in this house since he bought it. So he didn't even turn around to check it out, and he proceeded to wash his hands. It took him a few moments to realize that the noise hadn't stopped yet, and he thought that perhaps his toilet was broken. Joe finally turned around, confused and wanting to have a look at the toilet, when he saw that strange creature lying on his bathroom floor. "Whoa! What the heck is that?" Joe exclaimed as he jumped back away from that thing. He stood there frozen for a moment, just watching the creature flopping up and down. He couldn't believe his eyes. After some moments of pure disbelief, Joe sprinted towards the closet where he kept his cleaning supplies, and he grabbed the largest bucket he could find. He took a towel, pushed that creature into the bucket, and filled it with water, and then it finally started to calm down. Joe realized that it was some kind of fish, but he had never seen anything like it before. It was just this huge, shapeless, slimy blob, and it was the ugliest thing he had ever seen. It was mostly white with pinkish parts, and Joe clearly saw its eyes and mouth. Where had this come from? He took several photos from different angles, hoping they might help identify the creature later. Then, placing the bucket safely in his bathtub, he ensured it had enough water to keep the fish alive for now. He then tried to find any information about this fish online but couldn't find anything useful. Typing descriptions and uploading photos to various forums and social media, Joe hoped someone might recognize it. Despite his efforts, all he got were confused comments and wild guesses. He was at a loss for what to do and finally decided to take it to the vet. He placed the bucket carefully in his car's passenger seat, buckled it up, and drove off, hoping the vet could shed some light on this bizarre situation. However, it was the weekend, and most vet offices were closed or either booked full. Joe called one clinic after another, growing more desperate with each rejection. Finally, he found a vet who was intrigued by his description of the creature. Relieved, Joe drove to the clinic with renewed hope. Dr. Simmons met him at the door, his curiosity piqued by Joe's phone description. Inside, the room felt professional and calm. Joe placed the bucket on the table, heart racing. Dr. Anderson leaned over and peered in, then gasped. His eyes widened in disbelief, momentarily speechless. The fish seemed to challenge everything he understood. Joe waited silently as Dr. Anderson slowly regained composure. Then came a series of detailed questions. Where had he found it? what had happened. Joe described discovering the fish next to his toilet. The vet listened closely, taking notes, trying to make sense of the strange scenario. Without warning, Dr. Anderson picked up his phone and called the police. He spoke with urgency, using the word proof. Joe sat frozen, confused by the escalation. Joe asked why the police were involved and what kind of proof the vet meant. But Dr. Anderson gave no answer. The refusal to share more information only deepened Joe's confusion and worry. It was clear something was wrong. But without answers, Joe could only speculate about the reasons behind the vet's sudden, alarming actions. Then Dr. Anderson asked Joe to wait in the room and left. He shouted for help, and Dr. Anderson's voice came through the door, apologizing but insisting Joe stay until the police arrived. Finally, the lock clicked, and a police officer entered. He told Joe he had a few questions. Though relieved not to be alone anymore, Joe felt a surge of nerves. Joe sensed the skepticism and tried to stay calm, hoping his honesty would be enough. After noting Joe's details, the officer said he was free to go, but they would contact him if tests on the fish revealed anything. Joe left the clinic, unsettled by how wildly the day had spiraled. Back home, the quiet did little to comfort him. He called the friends who had visited the night before and told them about the fish, the vet, and the police. Their reactions matched his shock and disbelief until he mentioned the authorities. That turned their confusion into real concern. The tone of their conversation shifted. What started as a strange incident was now something serious. The tension was undeniable. Later that evening, his friend Mark appeared at Joe's door, visibly anxious. His presence brought a bit of comfort, but his expression said otherwise. Mark apologized and admitted that they hadn't expected things to escalate. He said he had something important to share. Joe listened closely. Mark asked him to come outside. Without hesitation, Joe followed, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. They walked toward a forest nearby. The path, usually familiar, now felt strange and uneasy. Eventually, they reached a river, and Mark stopped. They had reached the place where the strange events began. Mark pointed to the water and admitted that he and the other friends had found the fish there and thought it looked funny, so they decided to prank Joe by placing it in his toilet. Joe was stunned. His initial anger gave way to curiosity. Why had this harmless prank triggered such a serious reaction from the vet and police? Driven by a need for clarity, Joe called the officer who had taken his information. He explained the prank and how the fish had ended up in his home. The officer's reaction was immediate. They were both asked to come to the station. The drive there was tense. Neither of them spoke much, both unsure of what awaited them. Once at the station, they were separated for questioning. The atmosphere was stern, reinforcing how serious the matter had become. Meanwhile, a police team went to inspect the river, collecting samples and surveying the area. The attention given to the prank's origin hinted that there was more to the story than anyone had realized. Mark cooperated fully, explaining everything he knew. Eventually, both he and Joe were released. Though relieved, the experience left them shaken. What began as a light-hearted joke had taken on serious weight. Days later, the police returned to the river following test results. This time, their search was wider and more meticulous. Hidden in the surrounding woods, they uncovered a secret illegal animal testing lab. Authorities secured the area and entered, finding numerous animals and quickly arresting the lab workers. The facility had been running unauthorized experiments and had imported rare species illegally, including the fish found in Joe's home. It was revealed that the fish was a blobfish, a species native to Australia, brought in illegally for experiments. The prank had unknowingly involved an endangered animal, elevating the matter to a serious crime. The revelation sparked wider discussions about wildlife trafficking and ethical conservation. What had started as a joke now became part of a larger issue. Joe's bizarre story caught the attention of the media. News outlets covered the prank, the investigation, and the shocking discovery that followed. He was interviewed multiple times and recounted the surreal chain of events. As the story spread, Joe became a minor local celebrity. He used the attention to raise awareness about animal rights and environmental protection. Though the experience was intense, Joe and his friends eventually found humor in how their prank unraveled. The absurdity of it all brought them closer. Though Joe made it clear he was planning a clever revenge prank, one that would be memorable but harmless. Meanwhile, the rescued blobfish was returned to its native waters in Australia. Conservationists handled the delicate process, ensuring the fish's safety and successful reintroduction into the wild. The release symbolized a hopeful end to an unusual journey. What began with confusion and alarm turned into a meaningful rescue and a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of seemingly innocent actions. Joe never expected his ordinary morning to spiral into an investigation, arrests, and global awareness. But in the end, a strange fish, a simple prank, and a curious man helped expose a hidden crime and make a difference.